Hey guys, Nazori here with a quick Throne and Liberty boss guide. This one will be for Lequirus in the Cave of Destruction. I'm going to make this a quick guide and just give you a breakdown of the need-to-know mechanics so you can get in there and clear this. Now, this boss is one of the easier bosses in the co-op dungeons, and some of her mechanics can be slightly ignored, making her definitely on the lower challenge side of the lineup. But let's go ahead and get started. After popping all 3 eggs on the 3 platforms around the boss arena, Lequirus will fly down and await to be aggroed. The tank will want to grab her, and an important tank note here is that during normal DPS phases, if the person with the highest aggro moves away from her, Lequirus will emit a stacking poison AoE that will affect the group. So you'll want to avoid this by just staying close and keeping aggro at all times as the tank. Now you will notice some blue and red paralyzing ants spawning during this phase, as well as an electric circle with one of those corresponding colors. I'll get to those in a minute as they relate to the gem ant phase. But back to the DPS phase here. After some fury attacks, the little purple circle moves that you need to block, Lequirus will raise her arms in a longer animation, signifying that she is about to do a set of unblockable heavy swings. The tank and healer will need to be ready for this with some mitigation moves, as the hits are likely more than the tank's full health bar. Now, after some time, Lequirus will do a voice line in ant speak that sounds like, "You flee!" I'm probably playing it over, but we could include mine too, because it was pretty good, if I'm not gonna lie. This will indicate that you need to get off the ground. This can be done in one of 2 ways. The simpler of the 2 is to just run to one of the 3 pillars on the outside, one of which will spawn the gem ant. There will be an egg on top of each one of these platforms, so do not go to the top of the platform until the egg pops. If the egg pops while you're up there, it will send the player flying and you'll probably get hit by the ground AoE. After the boss ground AoE, you're going to want to get to the pillar that has the gem ant and DPS it down. During this phase, the boss will be stacking a poison on the group, so you're going to want to do this as fast as you can. Now, the second way to do this mechanic is more efficient, but requires a bit of extra effort. So I had mentioned earlier the 2 colors of paralyzing ant during the DPS phase. There is also an electric static circle field somewhere near the boss. This static circle will spawn a pillar at the start of the gem ant phase. In order to use the pillar, you need to kill an ant of the proper color and obtain the buff of the static field. So make sure you do not try this unless you see the buff on your character. If you try this without the buff, you will be electrocuted and killed by the boss's AoE. An important thing to note here, if you kill an ant for the buff too quickly, it will wear off before the phase change and you'll wind up getting electrocuted and die. So make sure that you have the buff before you try and jump on that pillar. If you don't have the buff, just go to one of the 3, as I explained earlier with the simpler method. So now this one is more complicated, but why would it be worth it to do it? So after the pillar pops, you'll be launched into the air and you can safely glide to the gem ant. This is not only typically the faster way to kill the gem ant, avoiding more of the stacking poison in this phase, but the pillar exploding also gives all players on top of it an attack bonus for the entire DPS phase. So you wind up killing the gem ant quicker, as well as doing more DPS to Lequirus during the DPS phase. This is likely the best way to actually do Lequirus, but it's not necessary. Plenty of groups ignore this entire mechanic, and you can too. It's not a big deal. Now, after you've done this and get Lequirus past the halfway mark, she will add in 2 mechanics during the DPS phase. One will be that she will levitate players in the party, and I'm not going to lie, we have not figured out any way to avoid this. We're not sure if you back up far enough away. We had some ranged players say that this was helping to avoid the mechanic, but it just seems like one way to add some difficulty to the fight, and it seems mostly unavoidable, especially for melee players. Now, if you have any information about this, put it in the comments below, and I'll pin it up there for everyone to see, because I would love to know if there was any way to avoid this. We tried a lot of different things and couldn't figure anything out. So basically, you'll get lifted up in the air. It basically makes you unable to use moves for a few seconds, and then you can either glide down or just land. There really isn't any fall damage, if at all. Now, aside from the levitate, she will also put larva on some party members. This is also a bit of a confusing mechanic because we did the mechanic a couple times and it didn't work, but I'll explain here. What you'll have to do with these larvae is get next to another party member with another larva, and this seems to diffuse them, because if you don't diffuse them, they will explode and kill you. So you'll see a color change when you do this properly. I want to note something important, that I think if you're next to someone that already has the larva, it doesn't seem to count them as the target you can use. I think moving away from them and back over, or moving to a different party member, is the way to go here. Because when we tried all stacking together with the larva, we actually all wound up exploding and dying. So I would say make sure you're kind of apart before the larva, if possible, and then just move around to other players until that larva changes colors. If it starts to get red, you are in big trouble. So just do whatever you can. And if you have any information more on this mechanic, let me know in the comments, just like the one prior, and I will pin it for some specifics. But it does seem to be touch other players, it diffuses it somehow. Anyways, that about wraps up the Lequirus fight. Continue the phase rotation until Lequirus is dead. If you have any questions, by the way, or you're looking for some streaming content, you can find me on Twitch, as I stream almost every night at twitch.tv/Nazori. If this video helped you out in any way, you can help me out by giving it a thumbs up or a comment. I would absolutely appreciate it. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you around.